My parents spent years calling me the failure. So when they moved into their dream house, they had no idea I was the one who owned it. I grew up knowing exactly who I was in my family. Not because I decided it, but because my parents decided it for me. I was the failure. They never whispered it. They never softened it. They wore it like a label and pinned it to my chest every chance they got. At family dinners, my mom would smile proudly at my older brother and say things like, "Now this one always knew what he wanted." Then she'd glance at me and add, "And then there's, well, you'll figure something out eventually." Everyone laughed. I learned early that silence was safer than defending myself. By high school, the comparisons were constant. Grades, jobs, cars, relationships. If my brother succeeded, it was because he was disciplined. If I struggled, it was because I was lazy. No middle ground. When I didn't go to college right away, my father stopped hiding his disappointment. He'd say things like, "I'm not wasting money on someone who doesn't know where they're going." That sentence stuck with me longer than anything else he ever said. I worked random jobs, warehouse shifts, late nights, early mornings, not because I was lost, but because I was trying to survive without their help. Still, it wasn't enough. The final breaking point came when I overheard my mother on the phone with a relative. She said, casually, like she was talking about the weather, "We don't really talk to that one anymore. He's just not going anywhere." Something inside me snapped. That night, I confronted them. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just asked one question. "Do you actually believe I'm a failure?" My dad didn't hesitate. If the shoe fits, that was the moment they cut me off. No support, no calls, no holidays, just silence. And honestly, first, it broke me, but later, that silence became the loudest motivation of my life. After they cut me off, there wasn't some dramatic goodbye. No shouting, no slammed doors, just nothing. I waited for a call that never came, a text, an apology, anything. Weeks passed, then months. I realized pretty quickly that when my parents said they were done, they meant it in every possible way. They stopped inviting me to family events, stopped mentioning me to relatives, unless it was to explain why I wasn't around. I found this out accidentally. One afternoon, I ran into my aunt at the grocery store. She looked surprised to see me, like I'd shown up somewhere I didn't belong. "Oh," she said slowly, "your mom said you moved away, said you needed space." That was the first time I understood something important. They weren't just cutting me off. They were rewriting me out of their story. At night, alone in my tiny apartment, that realization hurt more than anything they'd said to my face. Because insults heal. Erasure doesn't. I wasn't homeless. I wasn't starving. But I was invisible. I worked whatever jobs I could get. Warehouse shifts, delivery gigs, contract work that barely paid but didn't ask questions. I shared an apartment with 2 roommates who didn't know my last name and didn't care to. I remember one night, sitting on a stained couch, scrolling through social media. My brother had just posted photos from a family dinner. Everyone was there, smiling, laughing. My parents looked happy. I stared at that picture longer than I should have. Not because I missed the dinner, but because it hit me that they didn't miss me. I wasn't being punished. I was being replaced. Word travels faster than truth in families. Soon, I noticed the tone people used when they talked to me. Polite, careful, distant, like they already knew who I was supposed to be. Once, at a cousin's wedding, someone asked what I was doing for work. Before I could answer, another relative jumped in. "He's still figuring things out." They smiled like they were being kind. I smiled back. Inside, something hardened. That night, I made myself a promise. I would stop explaining. I would stop defending. If they needed me to be the failure so badly, I'd let them believe it. Silently, there's something freeing about being underestimated. No expectations. No pressure to perform. No one watching closely. While everyone assumed I was drifting, I was learning. I read constantly, listened more than I spoke, paid attention to patterns other people ignored. I failed a lot, quietly, bad investments, ideas that went nowhere, months where rent was a question mark. But each failure taught me something I couldn't have learned any other way. And here's the part no one tells you. Struggling alone hurts, but it also forces honesty. There was no one to impress anymore. No one to prove wrong. Just me and the mirror. Holidays came and went. I stopped reaching out. At first, that decision felt petty. Then it felt peaceful. I didn't realize how much of my energy had gone into bracing myself for disappointment, until I didn't have to anymore. I stopped imagining conversations that would never happen. Stopped hoping they'd come around. Instead, I focused on building something that was mine. Not to show them. Not to get revenge. Just to survive with dignity. And slowly, almost without noticing, it started to work. The change wasn't sudden. No overnight success. Just one opportunity that led to another. Then another. I paid off debts, upgraded apartments, stopped checking my bank account every morning with dread. For the first time in my life, I wasn't running behind. I was planning ahead. Still, I told no one, especially not my family, because somewhere deep down I knew, if they found out too soon, they'd rewrite the story again. They wouldn't see growth, they'd see credit, and I wasn't ready to give them that. I found out about their dream house by accident. A mutual friend mentioned it casually. "Your parents have been obsessed with this place," he said. "They talk about it like it's destiny." Apparently, it was everything they wanted. Location, size, neighborhood, the house they'd always imagined but never quite afforded. I looked it up that night, and for a long time I just stared at the listing, because suddenly all those years of silence, all that dismissal, all that certainty that I was nothing, had led me to a place I never expected. Not anger, not revenge, but a choice, and I had no idea yet how much that choice would change everything. I didn't rush into anything after I saw that listing. I closed the tab, went to sleep, woke up and went to work like nothing had changed. Because old habits die hard. When you grow up being told you're irresponsible, you learn to double-check every decision. You learn not to trust excitement. You learn that wanting something doesn't mean you deserve it. Still, the thought stayed with me. Not the house itself. The irony of it. By then, my life looked nothing like it used to. But you wouldn't have known that if you saw me. I still drove an old car. Still wore the same plain clothes. Still kept my head down. But behind the scenes, things had shifted. The business I'd built slowly, painfully was finally stable. Not flashy. Not viral. Just solid. Clients came to me instead of the other way around. Bills were paid early. I had something I'd never had before. Options. And yet, there was no one to celebrate with. I didn't call my parents. Didn't update relatives. Didn't post milestones online. Because somewhere along the way, success had stopped feeling like something to announce. Felt like something to protect. There's a certain kind of confidence that comes from knowing you can walk away. I learned that lesson the hard way. Through deals that didn't feel right, people who talked down to me, situations that reminded me too much of home. This time, I didn't beg. I declined. And every time I did, something inside me straightened. I wasn't trying to prove I wasn't a failure anymore. I already knew I wasn't. Weeks later, the listing popped up again. Same photos. Same price. Still sitting. I checked the neighborhood, the market, the numbers. For the first time, I didn't feel anxious. I felt calm. And that scared me more than fear ever had. Because calm meant readiness. This part matters. I didn't wake up thinking, this will show them. I thought, this will end something. Not their comfort. Not their pride. The story. The one where I was the disappointment. The one where they got to be right. If I did this, there would be no way to spin it. No polite euphemisms. No, he's still figuring things out. Just truth. I didn't put my name anywhere obvious. Used a legal structure that made sense. Signed papers without ceremony. Transferred funds without celebration. When the deal closed, I sat in my car for a long time. No music. No calls. No tears. Just silence. The same silence they'd given me. Only now it felt different. Felt earned. The house wasn't mine to live in. That was never the point. They found it through a realtor just like before. The price had dropped slightly. The timing worked out. They talked about it nonstop, apparently. How it was a blessing. How God had finally come through. How sometimes patience pays off. I heard all of this secondhand. And every time I did, I felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction. Sadness. Because even now, even in their miracle, they didn't think of me. They didn't call to reconnect. Didn't reach out to share the news. Didn't think to include me in the happiest moment of their lives. And that told me everything I needed to know. If they never found out, they'd be perfectly content. The reconciliation they'd offer later wouldn't come from reflection. It would come from discovery. I didn't rush the reveal. I let them settle in. Let them decorate. Let them feel secure. Because timing matters when truth is involved. And I wanted the truth to land, not like a slap, but like a weight. Something they couldn't shrug off. Something they'd have to sit with. Everything would change. Their tone. Their memories. Their version of the past. I'd seen it before. I was just curious how far they'd go this time. They loved that house. I heard about it constantly. From people who didn't know what it meant to me. My mother talked about the kitchen like it was sacred. My father bragged about the neighborhood like he'd earned it through hard work and sacrifice. They hosted dinners. Invited friends. Became the version of themselves they'd always wanted to be. Comfortable. Secure. Certain. And still, my name never came up. That silence confirmed something painful. If they could be this happy without me, then I'd never really been essential to their lives. Big houses come with big responsibilities. Taxes. Maintenance. Utilities. They were manageable, but only barely. I could see it in the way conversations shifted. My father complained more. My mother asked subtle questions. Do you know anyone who understands property stuff? Is it normal for repairs to cost this much? They weren't asking me. They were asking around me. Because even now I was still the failure in their minds. A routine issue. Something minor. They needed clarification on ownership details. The name on the documents wasn't familiar. At first, they assumed it was a clerical thing. Then they assumed it was a mistake. Then, they started asking questions. I heard about this from the same mutual friend who'd told me about the listing. Your parents are confused, he said. They keep saying the ownership records don't make sense. I thanked him and changed the subject. Some truths don't need commentary. They just need time. The call came late. Later than usual. Later than comfortable. I almost didn't answer. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew. I knew this wasn't about me. It was about the house. I answered anyway. Her voice was warm. Too warm. How have you been? She asked. I paused. Good, I said. A beat. She laughed softly, like she was embarrassed she hadn't asked sooner. That's good, she said. That's really good. We talked about nothing for a while. Weather, work, life in general. She avoided the real reason for the call like she was circling a fragile object. Then she finally said it. We've been having a little confusion with the house paperwork. There it was. I let her talk. I let her explain. I let her fill the silence with speculation. I learned something important in that moment. When people are unsure of their position, they talk more. I didn't correct her. Didn't confirm anything. I just listened. At the end of the call, she said something that stayed with me. You know, we always worried about you. I almost laughed. Almost. After that call, the tone shifted. Suddenly, I was included again. Invited to things. Asked for opinions. They spoke to me like I was capable. Like I mattered. The change was subtle but unmistakable. And that's when the anger finally surfaced. Not loud. Not explosive. Just heavy. Because nothing about me had changed. Only what they suspected I had. My father reached out next. He never called unless something was wrong. Do you know anything about trusts? He asked casually. I told him I had some experience. He hummed, thoughtful. Then he said, we might need help understanding a few things. Help. The word tasted bitter. Because years ago, when I'd needed help, they told me the shoe fit. They were circling the truth now, pulling at threads, piecing things together. I could feel it in every interaction. The politeness, the forced warmth, the way they listened instead of talked. They weren't reconnecting with me. They were preparing to meet the version of me they thought I might be. And soon, they wouldn't have to guess anymore. I could have kept hiding, let them find out through paperwork, through a lawyer, through someone else. But I didn't want that. I wanted the truth to come from me, not as a weapon, but as a boundary. So I made a decision. I invited them to dinner, at the house, too quickly, too eagerly. My mother sounded relieved. My father sounded curious. Neither of them asked why. They didn't need to. The truth was already waiting in the room. They arrived early. That alone told me everything. My parents had never been early for anything involving me. Growing up, I'd waited on them, after school events, after performances, after moments that mattered only to me. But that evening, they were at the door before I was ready. My mother hugged me too tightly. My father shook my hand like we were business acquaintances. Both of them smiled. Nervous smiles. The kind people wear when they're not sure what they're walking into. They complimented everything. The lighting, the furniture, the view. My mother kept saying how proud she was of how well I'd done. She didn't say what she was proud of, just that she was proud. That word landed heavier than any insult they'd ever thrown at me. Because pride apparently had conditions. I poured drinks. They declined. Another sign. We made small talk. Then my father cleared his throat. You know, he said carefully, we've been meaning to ask. I nodded. I didn't interrupt. He glanced at my mother, then back at me. About the house. There it was. I leaned back. Yes, I said. What about it? My mother spoke first. We've been trying to understand the ownership structure, she said. It's unusual. I let the silence stretch. Then I said it. I own the house. No build-up. No explanation. Just the truth. My father froze. My mother blinked, like she hadn't heard me correctly. You what? She whispered. I bought it, I said. It's in my name. The room felt smaller. My father stood up, paced, sat back down. My mother's eyes filled instantly. Not with relief, with fear. We always knew you'd do something, my father said quickly. Always. My mother nodded through tears. You were just taking a different path. Different. Not wrong. Not a failure. Different. I didn't respond. I let them talk. Because when people feel exposed, they fill the space with excuses. My mother reached for my hand. We made mistakes, she said. We were hard on you because we cared. I gently pulled my hand back. My father sighed. You have to understand, we were worried. We didn't want you to end up struggling. I looked at him. I did struggle, I said. You just weren't there to see it. Silence. It was subtle, strategic. They didn't ask me to forgive them. They asked me not to change anything. My father said, we don't want this to affect our relationship. My mother said, family is family. What they meant was, please don't take this away. Would you be here if I didn't own this house? Neither of them answered. They didn't have to. For the first time in my life, I wasn't asking for acceptance. I was deciding what it would cost. And they could feel it. My mother cried openly now. My father looked older, smaller. They weren't evil. They were afraid. Afraid of losing comfort. Afraid of consequences. Afraid of facing the version of themselves that had been wrong. I'm not doing this to punish you, I said. But I'm not pretending nothing happened. They nodded quickly. Too quickly. They agreed to everything. Space, time, counseling, honesty. Promises came easily when comfort was on the line. No shouting. No slammed doors. Just uncertainty. As they walked out, my mother turned back. We're proud of you, she said. I nodded. This time it didn't matter. After they left that night, the house felt enormous. Not empty, just honest. For the first time, I wasn't replaying the conversation in my head, wishing I'd said something differently. I'd said everything I needed to say. And more importantly, I hadn't said things I'd regret later. There was no victory rush, no satisfaction, just clarity. In the weeks that followed, my parents called often, more often than they ever had before. They checked in, asked about my work, invited me to dinner. They were trying. I could see that. But effort doesn't erase history. And reconciliation without accountability is just denial with better manners. So I kept my distance. Not out of spite, out of self-respect. A lot of people would have. I didn't, because I didn't buy the house to punish them. I bought it to end a lie. The lie that I was incapable. The lie that they were right about me. The lie that success only counts if it looks familiar. They stayed. But with conditions. Clear ones. We met again weeks later. This time I didn't host. Neutral ground. I told them exactly what would change if we were going to move forward. No rewriting the past. No pretending they'd supported me. No using my success as proof they were good parents. My father tried to interrupt. I stopped him. Calmly. This isn't a negotiation, I said. They listened. Because for the first time they had to. Our relationship didn't magically heal. But it stopped being fake. My mother apologized without qualifiers. My father didn't. But he stopped defending himself. That was enough for now. Not forgiveness, but honesty. I didn't rush family dinners. Didn't suddenly become available. Didn't fill the role they'd abandoned years ago. Because closeness isn't owed. It's earned. Slowly. Consistently. Success doesn't make people love you differently. It reveals why they loved you in the first place. Some people love your potential. Some love your usefulness. Very few love you when there's nothing to gain. That doesn't make them monsters. It makes boundaries necessary. Not because I bought a house, but because I stopped measuring myself by people who needed me to stay small. The truth is, if they had never found out, I would still be okay. And that's the part I'm proud of. If you're being underestimated, let them. If you're being erased, build anyway. And if they only come back when you succeed, you don't owe them access to the life they didn't believe in.